difference in the three-point field goal percentage. How can you close that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think shot variance is a real thing, and one of our strategies this year is to shoot lots of threes. I think that's something you have to do to, especially when you have a younger group, and then, we work obviously a lot with our player development to make those shots, but I think it's as long as, it's yes, we want to get threes up, but they have to still be quality threes that we're emphasizing in terms of are they, we like to call them like a rob shot. Is it in rhythm? Is it on balance? And are you open? And I think a lot of our threes are. So I think, having a lot of our spacing offensively kind of naturally leads to that in terms of our cutting principles and then just how we're spacing generally in pick and roll. So I think, especially against teams like Vegas, when you are playing against teams that have more talent, which is a lot of the time, you win games often if you're making threes, and shot variance is a real thing. So that's always going to be the strategy against the elite teams.
And my last one is, what do you lose not having a player like Sarah Ashley Barker?
Yeah, a lot. It's very challenging, if not impossible, to replace SA's production. And I think it's not just the on-court things. It's kind of who she is as a person. I think she's really one of the players on the roster who really kind of epitomizes the Fire fit and makes the most out of our practice environment, film, all of that. That's why she's improved so much this year. I think, the offense, like really growing into that role as a secondary handler. And I think, even shown glimpses at times, like her, second most efficient on our team in terms of points per shot. Really, just the things she was doing offensively, and then that's even without getting to the defense, which was her main calling card. I think she's really developing into a point of attack defender. We're able to utilize SA, putting her on really tough matchups, and she neutralizes them. So I got no doubt SA is going to come back stronger than ever, and now this is just an opportunity for other players on our roster. I think I really like the group we have. This is a great chance for some younger players now to get some more minutes and see what they can do.
So to piggyback off that, Alex, I mean, early in the season, your team scored some pretty impressive wins. I don't think a lot of people would give you a chance to do at the time, and she played a role in that.
Yeah.
How or who have you seen as the season's evolved that's capable of providing that support or motivation and off-court, fire?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. So, I think that's it. And, you alluded to it in terms of SA, what was, I think, the third most clutch player in the league in terms of net rating in those clutch scenarios. So, I think when it comes to those clutch moments, obviously Carla's also been up there in the top 5, but I think you look at BC as our leader. She grows every day in that regard, and she really has such a incredible understanding of what our intentions are offensively and defensively and what we're trying to achieve as a group. So I think really going to lean on BC just to keep the group together. And I think the other thing is we've tried to be very purposeful with this environment we've created where, in film sessions, we often hear multiple voices speak up, which is fantastic. Like film session today, we had 7 different players speak during a 15-minute segment. So we're trying to really, develop leaders, and I think that's an important part of this. So I'd love to see, everyone stepping up, having a voice, but also I think so many times in the past when I've been on teams when players are injured, they don't really have a role. Well, I really want to change that with SA and Sinai. Why can't they be doing some timeouts sometimes in practice? Why can't they be coaching segments? I think we want them as connected and as part of the group as ever and make sure we've got a really good plan for them.
Hi, Coach. We're not too far removed from Sarah Williams getting her first 2 starts of the season. I wanted to ask what you've seen from her in general and what have been her largest growth areas this season.
Yeah, so I think Sarah kind of earned this role for these backup 5 minutes for her defense, and that was really what we needed and still what we need as a team. I think that's our biggest kind of area of development right now. It's our defensive rebounding and just rim protection, and that's how Sarah kind of carved out that role. And I think it's challenging, because we're asking her to, especially on the offensive end, learn a completely new way of playing. She went from being very used to back to basket post ups, and explaining to Sarah why we think it's more efficient for her to be catching the ball in the pocket on rolls and creating advantages where she's able to create a 2-on-1 and then go downhill with a full head of steam, as opposed to trying to back up like really good defenders, which isn't really an efficient play type. So credit to Sarah, because yes, it's hard to do that, and I'm asking a lot to buy into a new way of playing, and I think that's why I've actually been so pleased, Nakas, just seeing like the cover solution she's been learning, and even just last week we introduced her to a Gortat seal against the drop, and she just like picked it up straight away. So I think she's just got to keep growing in that regard, and I think hanging her hat on the defense is going to be really important. So tonight, as it pertains to tonight, like navigating those rip screens, those cross screens that they're going to set for Asia, and making sure that she's staying in neutral and not getting clipped in them, being aggressive in our pick and roll covers, and making sure she's being very aggressive with that show, and not allowing handlers to just turn the corner. So I think we're trying to give Sarah like 2 or 3 things that we're really asking her to excel in, and that's what I feel is going to help the team the most.
And then just last one for me, bouncing off of the 3-point question from a little bit earlier, you have been a very aggressive defense pretty much all year long. The Aces, Pregame has talked about wanting to get more threes up generally this season, but they have kind of raised their volume against you guys. How do you kind of balance dictating terms, but also kind of limiting some of the shots they're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of that starts with some of the off-ball screening actions, running some nice like off-ball screening actions, some floppy, even some gets where it's Jan Gray coming off those, and we got to make sure that we're not getting cracked in those screens, those gets, and making sure we're navigating and arriving so it's neutral and it's one-on-one. And then I think the biggest, when you look at our when teams are getting threes up, I think it's often where it's kind of a lapse in our pick and roll cover, because I think when you play with a more aggressive pick and roll defense, sometimes that can lead to conceding more threes, especially when you're showing and things of that nature. But what's actually been most encouraging is we're third in our pick and roll defense right now. If you look at the pick and roll numbers in the league, we're third. So I think it's it was a bit of a risk going with a completely different cover that we don't really see in the W. But I think it's the pick and roll stuff's been effective. Where we're mostly being hurt is transition, and I think that's where especially relevant for tonight. It's when you've got 3 hot shooters on the floor, you've got to make sure you're more intentional, not running into the paint. And when it is contained, you've got to be just finding the most dangerous, getting out to those hot shooters. And I think that's been, that's what's brought our defensive rating down. In the half court, it's kind of average, but then our transition has been so poor that it's brought our overall defensive net down.